today we are going to look at a sample AP argument prompt, read an exemplar essay, which means a sample, and then we are going to use the AP Argument College Board rubric to assess it and figure out what score it would earn. So on your screen right now, you should see the prompt. Notice that the suggested time on the prompt page provided by College Board says 40 minutes. This is a very fast-paced essay. And then we have our written prompt. This prompt states, in many national elections, only a fraction of eligible voters actually cast ballots. For local elections, the voter turnout is often even smaller. To prevent this state of affairs, some countries, such as Australia, make voting compulsory for all adults. In a well-written essay that draws upon your reading, experience, or observation for support, develop a position on the issue of compulsory voting. So the issue I always experience with students with this prompt is, well, what the heck does compulsory mean? And though the prompt does not define it for you, you have to be able to use context clues to figure out what compulsory means on your own. Based on the context clues here, compulsory means required or mandated. And so the prompt question really is asking to develop a position on the issue of required voting. And so before we look at a sample, I want us now to look at the rubric to remind ourselves what we're looking for in terms of the AP Argument rubric. So remember that the thesis category comes first, and it's an all or nothing category. So you either earn the 1 point for having a great arguable thesis statement that answers the prompt and takes a position, or you don't get a point at all. The second reporting category is for evidence and commentary, meaning that you are providing good quality, relevant evidence to support the argument that you are trying to make, and that you analyze through that evidence. College Board calls it commentary, or a line of reasoning. In other words, you explain how or why that evidence helps to prove your argument that is available in your claim. And finally, the sophistication category, which, as I told you before in the rubric analysis video, is extremely difficult to earn. We are looking for sophistication of both ideas and also sophistication of language, sentence structure, and diction. And so we will go through this rubric more specifically as we are reading, or as we are scoring, rather, as we're scoring this essay. So here's a sample essay. Just by looking at this essay without reading it, we see that the introduction paragraph is quite short. That's good. You do not want to spend too long in the introductory paragraph. The meat of your argument is in the bodies, and you'll see that the student's body paragraphs are quite lengthy. And then still the conclusion, also very short. It's good. You don't want to spend too long in the intro or conclusion paragraphs. But here we have a solid 4-paragraph essay. And let's see now if this child did a good job explaining the prompt, taking a position, and supporting it. So I'm going to read this out loud to you. If at this point you are not a fan of hearing essays be read to you, then please just mute your computer, or you can fast forward to the part where we start analyzing it and discussing the essay. Okay, introduction. Politics have always played a crucial role in the state and affairs of society and its people. Thus, the importance of elections for officials is great. Citizens of society cast their votes, reflecting their opinions of the candidates and the issues, while some choose to abstain. The reasons for abstinence often vary, though in most societies that is a right that people can exercise. As such, legislation for compulsory voting should not be mandated, as it develops a sense of governmental oppression in the citizens and violates the inherent rights of the individual to personal freedoms. Body number 1. Compulsory voting should not be implemented on the basis of further oppression within a society. Throughout the world, there have been numerous diverse systems of government instituted to maintain order. However, corruption in some of these governments prompts a sense of unease, weariness, and a lack of desire to cast a vote. For example, in the Central African Republic, the government has been involved in rather dubious and precarious circumstances that reflect the instability of the nation. Some leaders that have been elected to positions of authority have exercised corruption that endangers the people. Others were part of rebel groups that attacked and annihilated societies, thus causing a fear in the citizens for the very entity that they depend upon. Should compulsory voting be issued within a nation as suspicious and fearful of a government as this? The psychological state of that nation would be driven to further ruin as much a mandate demonstrates action intended to involve every citizen. Most affected by life-threatening and unstable conditions would generally desire to abstain from voting as much as possible. They would not desire to become more involved in situations that threaten them and their families. Hence, since the sole purpose of compulsory voting is to forcefully involve every citizen in the election process, tension would inevitably rise in such a society. The already established sense of oppression by corrupt leaders would intensify further with such a legislation, as it has the potential to resemble the nation itself taking action against each and every individual. It would instead be beneficial to maintain an optional election process such that those who wish to stay away from the political affairs can do so, while those who wish to participate can. Body number 2. Highly developed nations, such as the U.S., encounter issues surrounding personal individual rights regarding the desire to be involved in the election process. The Declaration of Independence, the basic doctrine upon which the U.S. is founded upon, explicitly illustrates how every citizen has the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The rights illustrated are simple, natural rights, which generally apply to every individual as they are naturally endowed rights that prioritize and recognize the autonomy of the citizens up to a certain degree. As such, based on these principles, it should fall to the individual how they wish to act in a society. Some choose not to vote simply because they have no desire to engage in that activity. Some choose not to vote on the basis that the issues do not apply to them or are unnecessary. Others have personal grievances and reasons for avoiding the voting process similar to that of less developed nations. Despite the reasons, it inevitably falls to the will of the individual to participate. Instituting compulsory voting would infringe upon the natural right to liberty in one's decisions and activities in this regard. Therefore, compulsory voting should not be implemented on the basis of personal rights. Conclusion. Legislation for compulsory voting should not be passed as it has the ability to subjugate the citizens under a sense of oppression and violate the natural rights endowed to every individual. Less developed nations frequently encounter problems that discourage the citizens from voting in regards to fear and subjugation under the government. Highly developed nations would encounter issues concerning the personal rights of people in special respect to freedom. And that's our essay. Okay. So now we have to ask ourselves, go back up to the top, as an argument overall, did this child make a solid argument, back it up with evidence as support, and reason through his ideas with explanation, insight? And I think yes, overall, this child does this, and he does it pretty well. So introduction paragraph, here we have a nice amount of context, some background information about politics. We have some background information about voting and the reasons why people choose not to vote. And then finally, as we are required to do, we include, or this child includes, a thesis statement at the very end. Legislation for compulsory voting should not be mandated. So this kid is arguing no compulsory voting. And then this child says that it develops a sense of freedom, a sense of government oppression in the citizens, and it violates the rights of personal freedoms. So I have to ask myself here, did this child stay on prompt? Did this child develop a position and not just restate the prompt question? And does this child have some sort of argument statement happening here? And I think yes, I would absolutely give this kid the point for thesis statement. The thesis is where it needs to be, and it does what it needs to do. Great. So that's 1 point so far. The next question is, does this child provide quality evidence that not only is relevant to the issue and the argument at hand, but it supports it and it makes his argument stronger? And I think yes, it does. So in this first body paragraph, the child talks about the Central African Republic and how that government is a little, or was, I should say, a little bit iffy in terms of, corruption, I suppose. And so this child not only talks about and shows a thorough understanding of what's going on in the world, which is always super important for this course. Know what's happening in the world around you so that you can talk about it and use those instances as evidence. But this child uses this evidence, I think, quite well and explains pretty thoroughly. Notice the length of the paragraph. While quantity doesn't always equate to quality, I would say that this paragraph is the stronger of the two paragraphs in this essay, because this child not only provides a good quality example to support the claim, which is good, but compulsory voting should not be implemented because it essentially causes more oppression. This example shows how an organizational system can potentially cause oppression and is causing oppression. Thus, in the reasoning, he explains, if they were to have compulsory voting, think about how terrible that would be in terms of the oppression. And then he comes back at the very end of the paragraph, which is one of my favorite things about this essay. And he goes back to his claim at the end, kind of restates it. The second paragraph does similar things. The claim says that there are issues surrounding individual personal rights when it comes to requiring voting. This child uses the Declaration of Independence, which is a text, to support that particular argument, that we are all given, in the United States specifically, and he does mention that in the claim, that we are all given natural rights, freedoms, and rights. And one of our rights is that we have the freedom to vote or not to vote. And that is our right to make that choice in a democratic nation. The other thing that I really like about this paragraph as well is, again, at the end of the paragraph, he kind of restates, in other words, the claim. And so both of these paragraphs kind of come full circle. Start with the claim, provide lots of support and evidence and reasoning analysis, and then ultimately comes right back to the claim to round it out. Finally, we have our conclusion paragraph. I think this conclusion is pretty good. The conclusion paragraph really just restates what's happening in the essay, the big points that he made within the piece. So going back to our rubric, I already said that I would definitely give this child a 1 out of 1 for the thesis point. Coming down to the evidence and commentary, I'm going to say, without even reading the rubric, because I know it so well, this essay is not going to earn a 0 or a 1. There is not generic evidence and there is not summary. And so we're already looking here at the 2, 3, 4. Looking at the 2, does this earn a 2 out of 4? Does it provide some evidence? Does it explain how some of the evidence relates to the argument, but the line of reasoning is faulty? Does it have generalities? Does it include simplistic explanations or make one of the 2 points well? And I say, no, it does not earn a 2. It does a much better job than that. So right now at this point in this video, I'm going to ask that you press the pause button and that you read individually on your own over the 3 requirements and the 4 requirements. I'm telling you right now, it earned either a 3 or a 4 in this category. So on your own right now, because this is how you are going to best learn, pause my video and read the 3 and the 4 and figure out, what do you think? What is your opinion? Does this essay earn a 3 or a 4 for evidence and commentary? Okay, now that you're coming back, hopefully you've read over the descriptors for the 3 and the 4. I'm going to tell you that this essay earned a 4 out of 4 for evidence and commentary. And if you read through these descriptors, hopefully you agree with me. Finally, we're in the sophistication category. Sophistication means, does this child have sophisticated ideas or language? And I think, yes, this child uses quite an intense vocabulary, varies the sentence structure quite nice. And are the ideas sophisticated? I would say yes, some of them are sophisticated. Does this child show awareness of the world around him? Yes. And so ultimately, this essay would score a 6 out of 6 points based on this rubric. It is as good as it gets.